And so basically, I put together this group because I wanted to read this stuff again. It's been a while, and I also wanted to hang out with some of you and speak to you. Um, and so the questions that I ask to mobilize the group are questions that are all real to me. Some of them will be more stupid than others, so I apologize, but that's necessary sometimes. And I guess if I wanted to say before we get into it, um, just maybe one conceptual point, which is that this whole thing about anxiety, I mean, basically to me, and again, not something that I need to impose on all of you, but to me, it is and you can read psychoanalysis like this in a general way, is a confrontation with the legacy of the Augustinian volitional subject with all of its explanatory and ideological power that has dominated the Western tradition, a confrontation with that and with a desire to put our idea of the subject on the far side of that conception. And Freud, to me, is kind of um, twisting the knife in the Western tradition, which believes at the point of the latter half of the 19th century that it has overcome that conception, which I don't think it has. He likes Nietzsche. Freud likes Nietzsche, probably for similar reasons. Um, and then Lacan comes along and tries to go the whole way. And the anxiety seminar in particular, whatever else it is a psychoanalytic theory of action, of the act, which is attempts to be definitively beyond that notion, that Augustinian notion of a volitional subject with a divided will, one will going in the direction of uh, the way of God, and the other the way of man, afflicted with the uh, this notion of original sin. And so next week, I we're going to read some Kierkegaard and some Heidegger, both of which are mentioned by Lacan in the Lacan seminar. But there's also that other piece that is feels relevant to me. Um, so yeah, so that is, I suppose, what I have to say at the moment. And I guess as I said, the kind of direction I want to go is talk a little bit about the Hoffman story and the Freud's uncanny essay, and then this kind of theoretical thing, inhibition, symptoms, anxiety, and then maybe if we have time, the Freud journal from by Salome. But any additional thoughts before we press on? Okay. Um, I guess the first question that I had was, do you guys think that the Sandman belongs in the genre of horror as we understand that?
There was precisely one point in the story where I was genuinely freaked out,
Mm.
which might have been that I was just caught off guard, or because I forgot the structure between reading. But at the point where it moves from uh, letters and just reproducing ostensibly the letters, and all of a sudden the narrator started speaking. I was
Hmm.
for a second convinced that it is whatever is haunting uh, um, Daniel, like speaking directly to us. That was very jarring,
Mm.
and it kind of colored everything, like the rest of how I comported towards the story. Uh, but it's also mostly, well, I guess it's not too out of character, but it's mostly funny and not a little bonkers. Again, it's not necessarily not par for the course for genuine horror, but like not heavy handed, not too gothic. Certainly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I thought uh the beginning is like, or at least similar to like a Henry James novel. It has a kind of suspense and excitement to it that often is comic, and then there's that change that happens in the middle. Uh, okay, another comment. X is saying felt more dreamlike or voyeuristic into the grotesque than horror. Didn't feel scary. The structure of the story doesn't generate suspense the whole way through, which is necessary to horror. So are we thinking that at least our conception of horror is um yeah, I mean I guess just to try and make it as transparent as possible, how would we formulate a kind of, we don't have to attribute a genre to whatever it is that the Hoffman story is necessarily, but uh what would make a horror, a piece of horror, either a film or a story or whatever, distinct. I mean, comedy is not necessarily the defining characteristic. It doesn't seem, but maybe.
I mean, I think I do feel like I would lean towards a broad view of horror that encompasses like kind of the eerie in general, but I also feel like this story is very proto noir. It's very reminiscent to me of like a Hitchcock movie like Vertigo. There's even I think there's even a connection between the two. There's got to be. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. So then when I think of like would noir qualify as horror, I would have to say no. But I feel like the genres are less distinct at this point in time. Like at this point in time, I feel like it's the gothic and maybe horror is just something that on a historical level kind of comes out of the gothic. Um, so I'm not sure. I would lean towards yes, but I would also lean towards that it has to be defined in historical terms of like when did this genre develop? When what were the conventions of the time, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like horror is more of a literary effect than a genre, as you said at the time. I mean, maybe this is wrong, but historically, um, yes, they're the Hitchcock movies, obviously, but when we, but the Hitchcock movies seem, I agree, more closer to this than to like Saw, I guess. And it seems, yeah, maybe, and this is just a speculation, but horror as we denote it or as what we refer to as horror, seems to begin with something like I don't know, like what they call the slasher movies in like the 70s or something like that, where you have an imminent uh an agent of evil, I guess, that's on the hunt for maybe not the innocent, but
Well, yeah, that's another effect of like, okay, is there would we associate horror more with the victim being innocent or the victim being guilty? Because I feel like having an innocent is maybe key for Gothic literature. I may be like thinking about this in the wrong terms, but I feel like there's a focus on innocence, even if it's like innocence lost or something. Where I feel like in horror proper, there is maybe like no true innocence. And like if you think of like Lovecraft, like the protagonists of Lovecraft stories kind of bring their fate on themselves with their you know um, pursuit of knowledge. So there's kind of a Faustian element to it. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm also thinking of like Poe versus Hawthorne, like within American romanticism. Like, would we say that Poe is horror in a way that Hawthorne is not? I don't know.
when there's several questions I have. A question that I wanted to ask is but that just came to me is the I forget her name, but the character, oh, Clara. Is Clara innocent? But we can put a pin in that for a moment. But I also had the thought that when Amichai was talking about the transition to the from the letter to the narrator, uh, there's a scene in the story. Um, I think it is in the second half, but where he's written the poem that is supposedly very good, but
Yeah, that's already reported. Yeah,
yeah, that's after you said,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, and then he says something like he's struck by horror, uh, like he can't recognize his own voice in it. There's something of the same effect once the narration is disembodied, and maybe it is because there is a certain kind of cathartic effect, even via the mechanism of suspense, when you seat the agent in the first person in the form of the letter because you have a warrant, I guess, to over psychologize. As in, you don't know if you can believe what they're saying, but you follow their line of thought as a kind of anchor in some way. But once you transition to this kind of bird's eye view narration, who is also not impersonal, it's it is still a personal narration, especially because um, the narrator is seems like they're still addressing a reader, but they no longer are situated in any psychological entity in the story.
So it's kind of like you're kind of identifying the effect with the recognition of that which is in you that you don't recognize, and sort of like um, the lack of grounding that creates or something. That's sort of what you're going for.
Yeah. Or at least that's why it felt, I think that's why maybe it felt unsettling to me, but maybe that's specific to me.
Well, it's also interesting because Freud says that I think he actually says that the recognition of the, I guess, robot as not being human is actually, I think he actually says it's like not uncanny or like is not as uncanny as the other parts of the story.
Hmm.
So he sort of downplays the recognition of that in others, but maybe that's just maybe
Absolutely,
the
absolutely with
yeah.
Freud here. It's a MacGuffin. She's a MacGuffin
Mm,
or red herring. She's not unique or it.
Did you feel like that was a comic aspect?
100%. Yes, his interaction with her. It's not only that it's comic. It feels like a set piece spoofing an entire romantic approach to 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 love and to women. And the idea that she's uh, the ideal auditor for for the long-winded stories that no one wants to listen. Especially since it comes from a very very prolific writer who never stopped writing. So it's very comical, and it's comical and a self-implicating.
that's true. That's a good point.
Um, X is saying when the narration zooms out, one starts reading in the mode of seeing all the characters automatically carry out their actions to the end, to their ends, and that she, as the Olympia, is a red herring in terms of being the automaton that everyone gets drawn into. And yeah, maybe the comic function is that I mean, yeah, there are moments where he's pursuing her and everyone around him uh is just kind of um half amused and half disconcerted, I guess, because she is just really yeah, and then afterwards, yeah, then everyone gets AI
Yeah.
psychosis, I guess, afterwards.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because they're like they want to like prosecute him for doing a fraud in society or whatever. It's very
And
Everybody
they
funny.
starts minding their hyphens. That's what happens.
what was that?
They start minding their hyphens, and all those other affectations of the AI writing machines have.
Mhm.
They have all those specific tests, like, okay, I'm talking to a real person now, I'm not. Or how do I make it evident that I am not a real person?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ixion mentions that everyone starts doing Turing tests on each
Yeah,
other.
yeah, that's what I'm responding to.
Yeah. Also, Amichai, again, my deep apologies, but I can hear most of what you're saying, but if there's a way to improve your audio, it is slightly
Okay.
underwater sounding.
Um, hmm,
Do you want to try and maybe switch to your phone just to see if that helps?
yes, yes, I think.
Okay. Yeah, does she? Yeah, she mainly says, ah, she mainly has, again, maybe, this is maybe a stupid question, but what tone when you were all reading, unless I read it and I also I did listen to an audiobook on YouTube. But did you any of you have a specific tone of her responses that you had in mind? Like emotional valence? The doll, I mean.
I mean, I interpreted it as like kind of like a deeply kind of empathetic listening or like active listening kind of response where it's like but like yeah, whereas like the impression of being lost in thought or something. But yeah. Also, I just realized that it's Olympia is also the name of the Monet painting that made such a stir in Paris in the 1860s, where it was like a sort of an imitation of a goddess, but it was just like a courtesan, and like caused a scandal because it like resembled the goddess but was not. So I don't know. That's a possible
Huh.
interesting tie-in, but I don't know if Monet was thinking of this at all.
Um, that is interesting. And Ixion says that they imagined higher pitched feminine croaking. I guess like a stutter, maybe. Here's the I'm putting in the chat what the picture that Jorge was speaking about.
It's the stutter is almost like the drive, right? It's the drive without desire. It's the like when Zizek compares the drive to, you know, zombie depictions or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah. I do not remember if the document in the folder had the notes, had Freud's notes. So I apologize if he didn't. Oh no. The other bagel had mold on it, unfortunately. But you can have this if you want. Yeah, yeah, please. Wait. Sorry, my girlfriend is she has a limp. Oh, well, he's just hopping around. Be careful. Are you gonna go to okay. Um uh I had somewhat of an uncanny experience last night. I was leaving my mother's house and my girlfriend was looking at a parking spot that she had believed. Wait, now we have. I hope his audio is working. Well, she had believed that she had parked somewhere and that her car was no longer there. Um, and that it was towed. And as she was fixed on the absence of her car, she tripped and fell down the stairs and I think sprained her ankle. And then insisted that her car had been towed. She has had her car towed before. I know it was a traumatic experience. But I was sure that it wasn't. She didn't park there. She parked somewhere else. And then I just asserted my truth, and it in fact was the reality. And so it was happily ever after, at least on that front. But now she's hopping around because she has injured herself. Okay, Amakai, can you
I'm
try
back.
out?
Yes, let me
Okay, much
let me
better.
know how I sound. Yeah, better?
Yeah,
Okay.
much better. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for that detour.
Oh,
Um,
no, no.
uh, oh yeah, something on the Freud essay. Another question I want to ask. Um, well, maybe I'll come back to the other one. Is Clara innocent? Certainly, she seems to be sympathetically represented. And the other one is, what do we make of this? Oh, I mentioned the Freud notes because in the notes, Freud identifies the son with the doll, as in Nathaniel
Yeah.
or Nathaniel sees himself in the doll. That is a part of the narcissistic cathexis, is that the doll is him and he is the doll. And part of that, part of the proof that's furnished for that association is that when, as a child, Nathaniel sneaks into the room with the with Coppelius and screams, and he's caught, and he's going to have his eyes ripped out. His father wins his eyes back, but then Coppelius unscrews his arms and
Yep.
legs like a doll. And then
Well,
so
it's more than a little suggestive, yes.
yeah, and so Freud, yeah, Freud says it at least does help with this, automatic response, spin wooden doll, which
Hmm.
we would be referring to him so yes, I wanted to. That's more of like a what do you think about question, which aren't always the best, but what do you think about that? And then also, is Clara innocent?
I'll make the stinker move and go for the literal meaning and say that for Nathaniel, she's too knowing. That is quite obvious. Uh, and that he would like her to have a different style of knowing at the very least. Uh, but but other than that, ornamental comment. Um, I I don't see how she's not really a force that acts one way or another in Nathaniel's life, really. She's not part of what is fateful about his story,
Hmm. Hmm.
one way or another.
Well, I guess that's why Freud says she's secondary.
Yes.
Yeah. And that, well, just Freud kind of his I think this is more explicit in the essay that Coppelius is the uh the something like the dark side of the father, which uh about whom Nathaniel has an ambivalence that is rectified by the distinction between the father and Coppelius himself. Um, and I don't know who was the one to furnish the explanation, but I was kind of interested in the lore that they were performing hermetic or alchemical experiments, and that he got lost, the father got lost in gnosis or something, and that's why he exploded himself.
Isn't it kind of in the story itself? That's like what the
Yeah.
neighbor
No, no,
mumble or
yeah,
something
no.
like that.
That is, yeah, the neighbor. Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I forgot who furnished that. It was a detail.
It's like a they say kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, right. They say, the neighbors say,
Hmm. I
Nathaniel's
think
dead. Yeah,
that's how I remember it, at least.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Nathaniel's dead. Gnostic exploder.
You know, there's like an alchemist's widower club, uh, and it's just something that happens. Well, they want too much and they explode.
Hmm.
Hmm. I wanted to take back a little bit, just the decisiveness of what I said about the non horror of the story,
Mm.
just to pinpoint where I do think it's before we move on, to pinpoint where I do think it's horror, and specifically the angle that it's um supposed to be an example of it. It is uncanny or unheimlich. Uh, it, I mean, it does end the way it end, and I do not feel like that ending is unearned. It ends in total calamity and in a quite horrific scene, after all. And and to me, at least, it feels like while the story in its latter half kind of hung in comedy, it kind of gathers back to the heft of a faithfulness.
And I think the word in the German that kind of uh, wraps up how it is a story of a horror or of something unheimlich is the word is Verhängnis. It repeats three times or so in the story. It means something like a fatality or a bad ending that hangs over the story. And so that's why I think it recommended it itself to Freud also in the exactly when he's thinking the repetition compulsion. Uh, anyway, I'm saying too much here, but the but the register of the horror is specifically in the hanginess of the story, in the fact that eventually it will have ended exactly as Nathaniel always suspected in this fatality.
Yeah. Yes. Ixion agrees with you in the chat. I felt for precisely the same reasons. I felt like that last. Well, there is a happy ending because she gets a normal guy at the end, at the very, very end. But I felt like but I guess in some sense that just compounds the fate, like
Yes.
that he was always going to be replaced.
Once he's out of the way, there can be another story can have a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but for precisely the same reasons, I felt like it was a tragic fate, not without a horrific dimension, like in the way of Macbeth, but it was tragic because of its decisiveness, um, and faithfulness, rather, and to me that sort of um, uh, I guess kind of deflated the uncanny effect. Although we will, of course, not very soon speak about what it is this Unheimlichkeit is all about. But to me, I mean, maybe it would be worthwhile, for for everyone who would like to mention what were the most uncanny aspects, because to me the um like I guess I felt sorry for him at the end. I also felt sorry for him uh when Coppola came into his, he was trying to maintain his sanity for Clara, and then Coppola comes back and
Yeah.
sells him the glass. I felt sorry for him. I felt like the uncanniest aspects were, um, when he is. I mean, they are kind of fleeting, aren't they? They're kind of, you can't really pin them down, and they're more structural. I do agree. I think it was uncanny when there was that transition in narrative perspective. I guess in terms of the content of the plot, the uh I felt like the kind of suspended moment of gazing at the doll from afar before an interaction started was uncanny. I guess I also felt maybe that the time uh when Nathaniel is hiding and he sees Coppelius say, "Let's get to work," was also a moment of a spookiness or creepiness, if I could use a vulgar. So that's what, but then there are these more kind of tumult, you know, I mean, I guess a background question is, could an action sequence be uncanny? Because I feel like the last bit, and Jorge mentioned Hitchcock, and what is occurring to me is that there's also a tower scene in Vertigo,
Hmm.
and that I mean, I guess that involves a double with the woman. So that maybe is an action sequence. I mean, I guess that is Hitchcock's genius, is that he's able to so cleanly just let action and the uncanny, which is typically a kind of paralysis, kind of flow into each other. But anyways, no, I'm rambling. And so Ixion says for him, the most uncanny bit was at the end when Coppelius knows what will happen and assures the onlookers of what's going to happen, like assuring the audience with the knowledge of the self annihilation. Yeah, and that's another question that occurred to me. The so-called breaking of the fourth wall. That would seem to be a prototypical moment of the uncanny, and it would also be a structural aspect. Um, but I can just think of so many instances of that device, if that's what it is, that are have no emotional effect or no emotional success rather for me.
There's
Well,
almost like, oh,
go ahead.
y- you first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the most uncanny aspect of it to me was the scene where he comes in and tells him the glasses, and he, initially refers to them as eyes, and there's this very interesting kind of slippage of meaning where the eye and the
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
telescope are, almost you can almost see them kind of flowing into one another, and it's kind of like, he's wondering whether the person before him is the same as this, Sandman from his childhood, and it's kind of like that to me is where the doubling of things and persons is most
Uh-huh.
present. And I
Hmm.
would agree with Lex that the end is, um, and Coppelius saying that is also a very uncanny moment.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, the eyes, selling the eyes, that inversion, or maybe not inversion, but yeah, that it's a play of signification, which seems essential to the uncanny.
Yes, you open your door and suddenly everything acts like a dream all of a sudden for a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
like this person like refuses to not act like it's a dream, and everything about him. That is very weird.
Hmm.
Um,
Ixion is saying that um, the Coppelius says, he was doing that meme where it's a canon event, so you can't intervene in in your friend's self-destruction.
mm.
That's very true.
But that's hilarious, though. That's not. That's.
But 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 he's the one who acts like it's a story.
Mhm.
That's totally part of what makes him the
Yeah.
unheimlich part.
Right.
And his appearance at the end is it's a twist almost. It's almost like the end of The Sixth Sense or something, because up until then you have no reason really, or no binding reason not to see it as a psychological story. It's
Hmm.
all about his descent
Hmm.
into an obsession. And like, the thing about the way that Freud psychoanalyzes it is that it's just all there, and it can be very straightforwardly just what's happening to him. except that it also happens to have been entirely true and justified. And that's what you learn just when this weird guy, this obvious villain, is there having survived the person whose psychosis he might be. So obviously the real thing, the real McCoy. So so definitely it consolidates the horror of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very good. He is, I mean, yeah, Coppelius is the one who knows most that it is a story. And that's because at the end of towards the end of the Freud essay, he singles out the literary uncanny as a third species of the uncanny,
Hmm.
which is able to make things appear uncanny that would not otherwise be so in real life. That's how he formulates it.
Like reality is authored.
Yeah, but clearly Freud might change his mind if he were living in the age of the internet, where you can have um, a real an expression of a personality in real life be that of someone who knows about the story in which we are all participating. Though I guess the question would be whether or not that deserves to be called real life. But regardless of the status of that, uh,
Well, the point is that but he knows that another person's story, real life, is a story. That's you know, being Don Quixote in Don Quixote is one thing, but being a bit character in Don Quixote that tells him that he's a character in Don Quixote, that would be an uncanny character.
right, right. So it's almost as if the quote unquote main character is uh agentially devalued
Mhm.
by a side character who, by virtue of being decentered, has more knowledge.
It- Not only that, he's the among all the other doubles that he is, he's also the double of the narrator and of that uh, eruption or emergence of the narrator after, like, in the transition from the letters. Exactly the same
Hmm.
position. That's why it feels so sinister. Also, like
Hmm.
he's intervening in the life of a person. I mean, what is the reason that Nathaniel has to act like he is possessed by this specific story? It is that he's written that way, and so the writer who's writing, the narrator who's narrating, and Coppelius who's actually puppeteering him in real life or in the life of the story, they kind of coalesce.
Well, if I were to give a determinate causal explanation for why he's like he is, it's because Clara doesn't believe him. I mean that function of disbelief, which is why I asked if she's innocent, because that function of disbelief seems so motivating.
That's the well, if we're actually treating it as a real life tragedy, like as a grown up tragedy, as a real story, and not just as all these nifty devices, then yes, that's the what's it called, the turning around the trope of the I forget the term, the transition, the turning of fate in the story. That's where it's sealed. In the Aristotelian sense, the word escapes me right now. Um, that's that's where it happens, where because that's where what he dreads the most, that all of this, like, Nathaniel is obviously very invested in his own story, and he can take whatever destiny, whatever verhangness is hanging over him, he's quite fond of, as long as other people believe him, as long as he's not the only one who buys it. And yes, the the worst thing that can happen to him is that she doesn't believe him, that she shuts him out. That is the that's why I put in the chat for the before the beginning of the session, the beginning of Hegel's philosophy of spirit, the 1805 ones, we're
Mhm.
talking about the night into which the being is taken uh, in when a human perceives. Uh, so he's picked into being for another, basically, and that is what is the doubling that is really uncanny for him and for the story. Everything else is like screens or fetishes for that. Olympia is a red herring or a MacGuffin, but she's really a screen for that doubling, where he's picked up into Clara, but in the register or in the modality of disbelief.
There's a curiously touching moment with I think what is his name? Sigmund or something like that. His student friend when he's in.
His Horatio.
Yes. Yeah, right. There's a lot of Hamlet um
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of Hamlet and he starts to be like her, but then he says, yeah, okay, something is really going on. I don't know what it
Hmm.
is, but I care about you. And he just completely he allows himself to be touched by that admission.
Oh, I guess you're putting your fingers on the moment of non-innocence in Clara, right? She does insist.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I mean, she has a right to, because what he insists on is in
Facially demented.
is yeah, in many ways the price is way too high.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to read um take the thesis of castration seriously, we would notice it in that dynamic as well. He doesn't allow himself to undergo the falsification that
Yes.
she requires in order to live a happy life. Um, yeah, yeah. Ixion says no one can pay that price. You can certainly try though, and yeah, the and of course being said yes to is is in many ways more diabolical, which is the way of the doll maker. He can have himself absolutely.
You mean that he indulges him with his quote unquote daughter, that he
Yeah,
grants him his fatherly favor?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I guess the turns out that the good father is nothing but the double of the bad father. That it's not that uh it's not that the one who's ostensibly on his side is less implicated in his doom than Coppelius. They're in as much in the same workshop together as they were
Yes.
20 or whatever years ago. And in a sense, their lifelong project is to fuck him over.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, Freud really stumbled on a piece of work with this one.
He does what it needs to do, yes.
It is such an odd story because it feels very like it felt very fragmented when I was reading it. Like it does progress to something, but it's like it has this weird sense of there being different sections and like the doll section in the middle that almost could be extracted. But
Hmm.
they are strung together, but then they're um yeah, it doesn't have the plot structure that we're accustomed to, that's for sure. Um but it kind of reminded me of Arthur Mawkins, like the Three Imposters, where it's like a bunch of sort of like individual horror stories all end up being kind of linked in the end.
Mm.
So
Like
so it's like
episodic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is the episodic more, is it better for the uncanny? I mean, there's something about continuity that seems to run in the opposite direction. I've never seen Stranger Things, unfortunately. So I don't know. I don't know if that is even relevant.
I can't say either because I only saw the first season, which I think is usually considered the best season. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other. Twin Peaks feels episodic in kind of a similar way to the
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah. Certainly, yeah. The David Lynch stuff is yeah, Ixion says memories looking back is uh previous time skipping over into your present. And I suppose, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but the point is that the episodic, which is maybe not completely non-linear, but multi-linear, is it creates certain kinds of intersections which allow this uncanny effect to emerge. I mean, like a dream. I mean, I guess that would be as Amakai said, and Jorge as well. That moment with the eyes and the spectacles, it's like, colliding,
Mm-hmm.
a collision.
That's precisely. If the episodic nature has anything to do with it, or if it facilitates it all the better. But I think obviously the way that the uncanny is enforced in the story is through all these repetitions and doublings, and the sense that if if this fatality of his life is one simple singularity, um, then it gets to touch itself or to startle itself whenever there's a coincidence or doubling or anything that becomes story-like. All of these effects are like this singularity happens to touch itself or startle itself in the dark. Uh, all of a sudden noticing that it's a story and that it's already heading wherever it's going.
So we can see, I think, that if one can extract from uh, from the psychoanalytic absorption, not even interpretation is not even the right word, um, of literature and of the literary affect, one can extract a theory of action, and I mean one needs to, if a kind of I mean, that's why the dream, I mean, one does not stop dreaming after one wakes up. Some kind of some kind of idea of action is necessary to make sense of agency in the play of well, in the play that is represented, but
Hmm.
it's not at all clear what the tradition, what the philosophical tradition of categories of practical reason in the very general sense could offer given the situation. Before we go on, and we can go back and forth, but before we try and take on the more
Hmm.
theoretical Freud work, I did just want to ask if Isaac had anything on his mind. Not that you have to say anything, but
Oh no, it's all good. I appreciate it though. You guys are doing great.
okay. Well, yeah, don't be afraid to interrupt or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
okay.
thanks.
Uh, so I mean, what really is? I mean, maybe this is too broad of of a scope type of question, but what is the relation between this stuff on inhibitions, symptoms, anxiety, and the uncanny? What might be a first way to build the bridge?
Well, I mean, they're both sort of like a break in the normal functioning of things. So either in the sort of like completed picture of reality that we have, or in the completed set of, I guess, like life movements that we have to carry out. Um, in most cases, it's kind of like a break or like a interruption. That's just my initial thought on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, a certain kind of functionalism is doing is doing a good amount of work, as in there's some kind of break, malfunction in at least the psychic equilibrium or whatever is taken. I mean,
Hmm.
equilibriums never have to be real to be scientifically valuable. Um, but some kind of disequilibrium, and you didn't actually have to look at it because in some sense we already know what is it is about. But I had sent those links on attachment style, anxious. Well, there's anxious, there's avoidant, there's anxious avoidant, et cetera, et cetera. But everything like that, well, all of contemporary psychology, industrial psychology, is some kind of functionalism, and that the warrant to identify psychic disturbances is given by a disturbance in function. And Freud begins like that in and I think there's lots we can recognize in Freud from our contemporary situation. There's lots that are unrecognizable, obviously, but Freud begins, especially when talking about inhibitions, disturbances in motor functions, walking, disturbances in eating, in work, the ability to work, and in some way that it makes a lot of sense. But I think the essay on the uncanny is so helpful because uh, it does not legitimate itself, at least internally, through a reference to some kind of functional apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say that the uncanny becomes registered because of an inhibition, which Freud says. I mean, this is one of the things that is helpful, and that I think contemporary psychology does take for granted, but doesn't say it like this because it would uh, create more questions than answers. But that an inhibition is not the same thing as a symptom. Uh, we can be inhibited in many things and not be in a symptomatic condition that would require us to go seek out a psychoanalyst, or whatever however we'd seek to resolve our problem. So it would also help maybe to try and clarify in our minds what is the difference between an inhibition, symptom, and anxiety. With the category of anxiety is more complicated, and the more of that long essay is spent trying to figure it out. But yeah, so what exactly is defining about an inhibition?
Yep. So before we differentiate between symptom and inhibition, I think what sets anxiety apart from them and what makes the uncanny, or the field effect of the uncanny closer to anxiety, is that there's sort of a failure to suture, uh, uh, if while inhibitions and symptoms are suturings or cauterizings. So in that sense, uh, the unheimlich is localized as a sort of anxiety, or on the level of anxiety, before there is this intervention that sutures or cauterizes.
Yeah. Yes, that is a good point. And that also reminds me, I mean, so I sometimes go too fast, not intentionally, and neglect certain important details. So always, don't hesitate to bring me back. But I thought what is also important to dwell on. Oh, Ixion is also saying basic distinction. This is good. This is good. Inhibition is a restriction of ego function, whereas symptom is an uh, extraterritorial. I think that is how, yeah, for
Mhm.
Freud's use, repression that the
Yeah.
ego can't use. So in both cases, as Amichai said, it is a kind of uh, what's the word? Kind of melding together, or yes, suturing. But what was coming to mind was just the very first part of the uncanny essay. And I think so, yeah, so sorry for the barrage of questions, but we can put all of everything that I asked to one side for a moment, and dwell on for a second at least why Heimlich and Unheimlich converge in their signification. And if we could kind of trot out that convergence, I think that would be helpful.
I mean, the basic issue is that the home is a place of privacy and also secrecy. And so what is homely for you becomes, you know, just regarded from the aspect of secrecy from the other.
Mhm.
Um, but it's you can't maintain that necessarily that position of your home versus other people's home all the time. And so when something is establishes that characteristic, it can go back and forth between the two. But it's the idea of something being locked up in the castle.
Yes. Yes, and I hadn't incorporated that kind of perspectival dimension, so that is helpful. Um, that from another point of view, what is private is I mean, I guess it is. I mean, I guess it from every view it makes sense that I mean to somebody else, what is private to me is a secret, but also I want to keep secret what is private to me to others. So yeah, in both from both ways, um, that holds.
And also like what you make secret for other people, could also be something you're repressing in yourself too. So it's kind of like, the best kept secret is the one that's not even fully known by the person who's keeping it. So
Hmm.
because if it's fully known to you, then that increases the chance that you'll be exhibiting it in some way or
Hmm.
trotting it out for the
Well,
other.
the crescendo of the lexical part of the essay, right? What appears in the bold letters is the Schelling quote, right?
Hmm.
Something to the effect that it's what was supposed to be kept secret or hidden, but has emerged,
Hmm.
um, something like that. So there is the dynamic, uh, or I would add that the the house itself, in its quiet every day, is always pregnant with the possibility that it will have exhibited what is otherwise kept secret most of the time. Uh, so wherever there is a routine, wherever there are parameters of what makes a home or familiarity familiar, there are implied all the things that are it's outside that when they come, there is no home anymore. Uh, the dog uh, pulls the house together, right? The dog dies, there's no more house. Your loved one goes away, there's no longer a relationship. You have something to lose. It's written into the familiarity and the homeliness and the thought how tight. What you can what you can put your money on is what's gonna betray.
Yeah, to veil the divine and surround it with an aura of the uncanny is the object of reference to the what was mentioned. Uncanny is what one calls everything that was meant to remain secret.
Mhm.
But it is the divine with a veil.
Mm. Well, that's not how. Interesting. I didn't know. Certainly not how it strikes Freud.
And but that is not, I think it is interesting how how the lexical discussion progresses because it becomes more and more romantic in the generic sense. You have Schiller to the left,
Mm.
by the lake lies a meadow, Heimlich hidden among the trees. That's how it's translated, at least. Uh, you have more Schiller. You have Novalis, who says, let's see, uh, yeah, the powerless spell of the mystery of hidden gold, hidden as translating uh oh wait, no, mystery is being translated from Heimlichkeit, can be undone only by the hand of understanding. And then again, Tieck, who's, I mean, romanticism is not it's not the most it's not the best word, but he's kind of adjacent. You bees who need the lock of secrets, wax for sealing.
Mm,
Uh, and so that would be the 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 lock of secrets is Heimlichkeiten, I think. Yes. Um, and then Schlegel, experienced in rare mysteries. Again, mystery. And then you have another Schiller poem that's the Veiling of Isis or something like that, the Veil of Isis. So yeah, so you have a it begins with all of the normal associations, this discussion, homely, cozy, um, intimate, maybe. Uh, you have a lot. I mean, it's very interesting. If there's a good amount of Luther's
hmm
translation of the Bible. Um,
Heimliche Rat.
yeah, yeah, privy counselor or intimate counselor. Um, and even Moses goes in. Wait, no, Solomon goes into the tent to speak with God as a friend. I mean, that Luther is basically. I mean, maybe not creating. Well, Amakai, you would be able to speak about this but better, but he is at least interjecting Heimlichkeit into the Old Testament and thereby making it so much more available for Christian conceptuality than
Yeah.
it was previously. I mean that is the founding moment of the Reformation. Uh, but it takes on this equivocal character which Freud trots out. And crucially, it's not the progression of this lexical discussion is not a diachronic one, as in it's not a history of the evolution of a word. It is a um well, my feeling is that it is a model of coherence. If we want to know, I don't think it's that helpful to do too much like preemptive Lacan explanation, especially because we will be working through it imminently. But I think what might be helpful is that at least one way to understand the so-called chain of signifiers is a model of coherence, which Freud very nicely demonstrates to us in this discussion of the convergence. It's not an evolution, it's a convergence of Heimlich and Unheimlich. Uh, and obviously, it is trot out by context, the context of the usage of the word. But we can see that the convergence itself is not being necessitated by the context. It's not the context which is making one you have one meaning versus an apparently opposite meaning. It's that is secrecy, intimacy, hiddenness, they are all bound up with each other. And you can represent the coherence in this progression, but the linearity of the progression is a function of the representation, not a function of the coherence itself.
maybe the most instructive quote uh, before all the romantics. I think a novel by a guy named Gutsko, something like
Yeah.
that. He says, "Where is it? Let me find it." Uh, mm, mm, mm. I'll find it in a second. Sorry, I looked
It's
for that.
the what you call
What you call Heimlich, we call unheimlich.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah. So it is, as Jorge said, it is it's a matter of grammatical perspective more than anything.
I
And
think
I yeah, go on, go on.
it, in the particular place, I think it does not mean you and we in the perspectival sense, but just in the dialect sense. I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a kind of adjacency.
Yes.
Yeah. Um it's also nice. I mean, he says in a kind of Heideggerian moment, Freud says the spelling Heimlich, which is an older spelling, I guess, deserves to become universal in order to protect this excellent word from obsolescence through easy confusion with um, the sense of the mysterious. Uh, I think that's what he's saying. I could be wrong. But Heimlich is very close, again, lexically, to the word for heavenly, which is Heilig, I think. Uh, which is just to say that there is a I mean, maybe seductive would be too strong, but there is an attractive force being attributed to both Heimlich and Unheimlich. Uh, it's not really reducible to semantic content, but it is the same in both cases. Yeah, locked away, inscrutable.
Yeah, I think I'll say ahead of next week. I think we'll see in the Heidegger reading that when he's speaking about the Unheimlich and Unheimlichkeit, uh, he's specifically using it in the unsecret or unhidden sense because it's another one of those words that the book is filled with, which are paraphrases of aletheia or
Mhm.
unconcealment. And so his and in the 30s it changes to a different use of uncanny of unheimlich, but in Being in Time, it's a question of being exposed or being the specific transparency that he's talking about, the existential transparency.
Yeah. Yeah, it is such a it's such a rich essay because I mean one has to be careful about not doing this kind of thing too much, but there is something uncanny about the uncanny as a signification because it is surprising, as Ixion says, this convergence, how easily, how continuously it occurs. Um and yeah, and once you have hiddenness, you have danger, or at least you're not so far away from danger, something being threatening. Um,
I'll add anecdotally that I I read this essay and the story a couple of years ago. I was just moved to after the October 7th, after the and the war started, and when it was quite quite fast, was clear that it was going nowhere good. And the first thing I ran away uh, to think with was the idea of the uncanny, was what the the kind of intimation that I had before. I'm not sure how it bore out reading it, but I know that what I came expecting to find is precisely the feeling that uh, something emerges that was always there, and all of a sudden it's right here. A rumor or a scent that became an expectation and became uh, 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 overbearing, and then all of a sudden it's right here and it has happened and it's in the open. So that's what sent me to the story back then. That's just
Yeah,
anecdotal, but
yeah. No, clearly terror in all contexts has a dimension of plays on the uncanny. But even now in so-called conventional warfare, with the um, I mean, being hunted down by a small robot in the places that you would assume you are safe makes it impossible to. I mean, I suppose it was lived. I mean, people, I guess, make these comparisons all the time that it was lived first in the trenches in the First World War. Uh, but there's something about something coming down on you, like an artillery shell, that is more more uh I guess tragic than something that is hunting for you, like a drone. But I guess maybe it all turns out that this is again an association. I was curious on what we thought of this has been a phrase that has been in circulation for a while, but the so-called uncanny valley. Is that a useful is that useful even?
I think it's a misnomer. I think that's a clear case of ungeheuer, not unheimlich. It's more monstrosity than uh, a perspicuous unsettledness. But that's just my Heideggerian bias.
I mean, what is it? It is usually referring to something that is trying to simulate humanoid expression, but fails to. Is that basically what it is supposed to mean?
Like literally too close for comfort.
Hmm.
I guess Olympia is precisely uh, uh, uncanny in that sense, which I think is a mock sense in the story too. That she's precisely the uncanny valley. It's like, oh, what is she? She acts like she's a human being, but she's not. But what I think is that at least within the story, it's a relief. It's whatever. So she's a bit weird, but she won't like not believe me.
Right.
And I mean, look at how people precisely like that. I mean, it really is maudlin how people do think like that. in our actual like life that we share with them, and they say, I ask ChatGPT because it's not embarrassing, it's not gonna judge me, it's nice to me, it does what I tell it. I mean, it can't be more literal than that, right?
Yeah.
Another instance of making the torment nexus from the Don't Make the Torment Nexus novel.
Yes, Ixion is also saying a bad idea to generalize from because it is a yeah, I mean it is in its intention a transitional concept about proximity, or I guess a failed proximity from robotic design, and things that are creepy, they're close but not quite isn't the operative bit. Lots of things that are close enough can be appreciated or cute if they're not creepy and scary. Like I assume Labubus or other dolls. I mean dolls of any kind, I guess.
I guess it has to be really we have to take literally the entire complex of too close for comfort, specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, encroaching. There's some kind of encroaching on our territory.
But isn't that like the at least the way that the risk is talked about? Like this shit is getting serious, right? It's getting so good at X and Y that X and Y is going to be out of a job, right?
Hmm.
It's encroaching. It's
Hmm.
humanizing in the sense that it becomes a very discomforting double in one way or another.
Hmm. Yes. Okay. This is good because this is a point of contact with the inhibitions essay because that would be, I mean, I guess it's not typically what we think of as phobia, in the sense of arachnophobia, hydrophobia, uh, agoraphobia, claustrophobia, whatever. But in a formal sense, that kind of fear of replacement, I guess, that is being signified, even if not, fully authenticated. Sometimes it can be said quasi-ironically, you know, they're getting close, they're going to replace some, or they're approximating some kind of humanoid expression. It's a fear, and the fear always has, um, at least it's described by Freud to always be defined by an object. Uh, you can't, I guess that implies that you can't be afraid of something indistinct. Fear is always characterized by some specific danger that has been picked out, and it is always deceptive for that reason. I mean, I guess I would want to know if this is. I mean, clearly to me, the use of the phobic is similarly unhelpful, um, as this notion of the uncanny valley, because it can just be empirically iterated forever. Uh, Even homophobia, uh, all the kinds of phobias. But I guess it seems like an important question to answer, or at least to approach, is what makes it so attractive? What makes the phobic so easy to deploy as an explanation for I mean dysfunctional behavior of some kind.
Are you asking, is it easier for the phobic to be deployed as a categorizing thing, or for the actual mechanism to be deployed by the person who has it?
Uh, Good question. I mean, both, I guess, in some sense. I think maybe I meant more
Okay.
directly the former, but both. I mean, they are reinforcing.
So you meant more like from the theoretical perspective. Why is it an
Yeah,
easy explanation? Yeah.
descriptive, but clearly also prescriptive. Um, like to be actually phobic of something would be prescriptive.
Hmm.
But they're both, yeah, but they're two sides. There's two sides of the, but it's easier to answer the descriptive dimension, or it's easier to,
Yeah.
because, we can be observers or play the part of observers.
Can you explain what you mean by the perspective deployment thing a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, we are just inundated with the deployment of the phobic as a description for so-called antisocial behavior. Um, could be politicized, as in the fear of
Oh.
homosexuality, or but it could be not. Could be fear of
Hmm.
blood, fear of needles, fear of. But it's marked out by its empirical accessibility, I guess, or empirical transparency, ostensibly. So in that sense, it is very it is very is very easy. But then Jorge raises, I mean, I take Jorge's comment to amplify the problem, which is that question as to why it is so easy at the level of theoretical deployment is, to me, just the other side of the question. Why do people internally go to a fear reaction, a phobic reaction, practically, prescriptively, when they actually do fear some specifically determined object? Uh, Although at that level, fear is always, I think this is intuitively the case, fear is always concomitant with some kind of aggression. I mean, I guess that would be true. That would be true for a description of it as well. Ixion says it is a way of not um, inquiring into the structure of the object, because you do. I mean, yeah, as with empiricism in general, you take the object for granted.
So
Spiders
the
are spider.
question here is like, why is like, I guess, like fear versus desire, right? Because the what we're talking about sort of mimics Lacan's description of like the object versus the objet, um, and the object being this focus being like not the main thing in question. And then I guess the other question would be like fear versus anxiety, right? Is anxiety kind of, I mean, I think Freud is suggesting that anxiety is a means of avoiding fear. So it's like two different levels, and it's like one is, but I think in the pop psychology description, phobic is invoked to say that there's for all levels of that, to say that for both the avoiding and the actual like fear reaction. But yeah, I think Freud keeps them pretty separate.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That anxiety is more, I mean, it seems like from reading that essay that anxiety is more primitive in some sense, and then an anxiety is a it goes along with helplessness, helplessness before some kind of libidinal cathexis that is intruded in upon by a real danger, uh, or where castration is the paradigmatic term, and then fear at another level allows, I'm just recapitulating or repeating what Jorge said, fear allows anxiety to be avoided, or a confrontation with the object, or the anxiety event, by pinning it onto some object which in principle is not as continuously present as the libidinal investment, which is of course always with us, because with the fear of spiders or whatever, the spiders are not always, they're not always around. They can be avoided. And it is interesting to consider that the pop psychology, they do oppose anxiousness and avoidance in the so-called attachment theory, where I guess anxiety is about proximity and avoidance is about distance. And Ixion adds, when Freud brings up the idea in the lecture where he questions why fear even evolved if we try to look at it through evolution, because it doesn't help you face the danger situation. Yes. And he says, in connection with that, he also says that children don't bring fear really into the world at all. I mean, we notice that they have no problem putting their hands into fire, or playing with sharp objects, or running up to a cliff's edge, or running into the street, or of course you can chalk that up to knowledge about the world. Um, and yeah, our nephews are constantly throwing themselves off of high places, but it doesn't really seem, it's not satisfying, I think, to say that children don't bring fear into the world because they lack knowledge. If we are going to think of fear as an evolutionary property, because if that's the case, then it should belong to the organism as an organism. Even if it doesn't have knowledge. I mean, it has the capacity to have fear, but it's not. It's a capacity so latent, that it requires symbolization. Uh, but if that's the case, then we land in this situation where you can fear symbols as well as so-called real objects, to the point where it's impossible effectively, as an AFF, affectively, to tell the difference between them.
Well, the word we're alighting here is danger, isn't it? Uh, what the child does not bring into the world, what it doesn't know, what it doesn't have, is any sense of danger, or that there are dangers or dangerous things. And we can even say that when it first learns to fear its own helplessness, that is the first danger. But it doesn't tell you anything about any other danger.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's why there's it's important. It seems important for Freud to diminish the theory of the so-called birth trauma.
Yeah, because exactly it is not anything on the level of knowledge or of object. It's
Yeah,
just just the how it felt that is imprinted.
yeah,
It lends itself to the basic set of symptoms or externalizations of it, but not to their sense.
yes. I mean, it makes sense that the birth trauma is a referent for some of these psycho analysts, and that it needs to be something like it needs to be acknowledged as a primitive event. And Freud, in various places, is concerned with the difference between primal repression and this after pressure. But the location of primal repression already requires the symbolization of loss.
It can't possibly be anything like repression. No. It, it's uh, uh, there's a bit in The Simpsons where Krusty is having a horrible, tacky show, and somebody says, "Who wrote this? A monkey?" And then they zoom backstage, and the monkey's like saying, "I find it remarkable that I wrote anything at all." And so something manages to impress itself, and it finds it rather remarkable that anything at all is impressed. It's no question of repression, but of an event that is so economically devastating that even though the baby is essentially nothing at that point, it gets inaugurated into being something by that shock, and that remains on a very basic level. Again, nothing of content. You're afraid. You feel like something is sitting on your chest, and like your blood, like your heart is racing. That's all. That's what's left.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm. Exactly. The excessive excitations. Exactly.
And even, I mean, one connection with the uncanny essay is that, those two senses, those two theoretical senses of the uncanny is uh the reappearance of something that at the level of the species has come at an earlier point in development,
Hmm.
and then I guess it reemerges in some kind of symbolic disclosure. And then the second is at the level of the individual, something that reappears that was buried through secondary repression. It's it is it's unclear if the more primitive event in those two senses are commensurable. It seems like they would be, and they should be, precisely because there is no, I mean, you can make the mistake of affording a lot of right to the birth trauma at the level of the individual that doesn't seem possible at the level of the species.
You mean that that a certain difficult birth would specify you? Because Freud seems to either completely rule that out or say that that's the kind of claim you need to have an empirical research before you make.
Yeah, that at the level of the individual, you could feign the hypothesis that the birth trauma is inaugural as an event, as a specifying event, but there is no, but at the level of the species, of the human species, there is no, I mean, the human species does not have an inaugural birth.
Hmm.
Yet something like a primitive anxiety that reappears in the form of the uncanny is applicable to both scales of human being, both individual and species.
Well, the what would correspond on the level of the species, or on the level of the kind of being that we are, would be the abandonment, would be the being on the other side of the urteilen, right? Of becoming this subject that's over against the world. That's the
Yeah, something like
that's the now
initiation.
traditional,
Mhm.
the famous Liegenlassen, or being left in the lurch.
Yeah, no, Freud does. I mean, Freud, and Lacan says that Freud invents the only modern myth, which is the slaying of the primal father.
Yes, but that would be, yeah, but that's on the level of something like castration, or that's on the level of the fantasy, or the fear, or the of reprisal would be what this. I guess that's exactly what I said about the story, about the Sandman, that it seems like it's something that only happens in a story or myth, or the fear of reprisal that you backform, and then ostensibly that's what happened, right? In the myth, in this primal myth, the killing of the father is just what genuinely happens to inaugurate, not the fear of reprisal, but just the thing.
Yeah. So yes, to Ixion. Yes, that is basically the relevance. And then at the level of the species uncanny, the things that Freud attributes to it are these, return of the spirits of the dead, the angry spirits, or totemic fetishes, all of the things we would associate with the supernatural.
The primitive assumption that the dead are kind of pissed off at you for still being alive.
Mhm. And for wanting them to be dead.
Yes. The unfairness of it all.
Mhm. And any unresolved problems, which the slaying of the primal father is that is why it is the original myth, because it is this scene of rivalry without an a priori justification. It's not a revenge. I mean, there is a competitiveness, sexual competitiveness to it that is distinct, defines the Oedipus complex. But it is, but whenever the Oedipus complex is deployed psychoanalytically by Freud, it always has to come in the course of some individual's drama with their parents, psychosexual development. Whereas this primal slaying is not, um, it is not dramatic in that sense. It is really mythical.
Not yet.
I mean, I suppose uh, on the question of fear. I mean, I think certainly how Lacan is absorbing Freudian psychoanalysis, but already Freud himself is having the experience of being able to read psychoanalysis or psychology psychoanalytically, because I mean you not only can, but you have to ask why is it that phobia is so I guess clinically or practically attractive, or it turns out to be at least. Um, I mean, one way to read it is that it allows the repetition of the basic methodological orientation where you can assign individual disturbances to objects. This is what I took Jorge to be saying earlier, that if you assign the individual disturbances to an object, basically, I mean, you have a whole kind of pseudo experimental field at your disposal. I mean, we know about exposure therapy, for instance. Uh, and the thing is that none of these techniques are necessarily um, dysfunctional with respect to that object. I mean, the whole point, the whole reason why fear would be more of a relief than anxiety is because you can negotiate with the object. And uh, the psychology of fear, or the psychological treatment of the phobia is, some way, some form of assimilation, negotiation. Uh, you can stand to be around it. You can stand to have the needle in you when you're at the doctor's office. No, not all the time, or you expose yourself that you can, maybe even reverse the cathexis of the object from a negative to an exciting one. But in no case does the structure of the fear is it dissolved theoretically, because a um it's always a subordination of the affective response to whatever object has been picked out, and whatever link of significance that has determined that object, which doesn't actually have to be interpreted, I don't think. As in, it's not actually necessary to discover the reason why I have picked out dogs to be afraid of, or unconsciously picked out dogs to be afraid of, or horses as a child. I mean, that's one of maybe I'll put up that case of little Hans on the in the folder, unless you guys have already read it. But that is mentioned in the Freud longer essay, but part of that story is that the dad is offering these psychoanalytic interpretations of the child's fear, like intervening in the child's life. And Freud is, I mean, the story of that case is that the Freud is trying to rein the father back in, to kind of try to give his child some breathing room. And the dad is obsessed with giving some kind of thematic interpretation, some kind of hermeneutical clarity to the content of the fear of the horse, which is associated with. I mean, the dad says um, that he is well. He's fixated on he's fixated on the horse's penis, and that this is due in some part by the mother's um uh I her her she's too nice to him. She caresses him too much. She excites him too much. And Freud is looking at this situation, and he is um glad to have come upon it because it shows the kind of total dimension of the Oedipus complex, which is involves the parent as much as the child. Is not just a projection by the child of some uh, implicit jealousy, but is reinforced by the parent's own participation and basically, I mean, the ambiguity of and but also the necessity of the castration, the notion of castration, and the notion of Oedipus for Freud's theory of the neurosis is that uh, I mean, it's all neurosis is all some kind of form of self-defeating enjoyment, um, and that the this famous motto by Freud, to transition from neurotic misery to normal misery is the goal of the psychoanalytic treatment. To not be like, I mean, like Amichai nicely described, that Nathaniel is so invested in his own story, his own faithfulness, and his compulsion to play out this in some sense this insight that his father is working to undo him and to fuck him over, basically. That what makes neurosis at once very difficult to deal with, but also what makes it a possible object of treatment is that you can be led out of this kind of self-incurred, but also, a genuine position of victimhood. And Freud talks about neurotics as victims. They don't choose to be the way that they are, but their choice is implicated in their disturbances. Um, so something like that is going on at the level of psychological theorization of phobia. I mean, that I guess that was the reason I started speaking about this, because it is a kindness, a kind of kindness that the psychologist is affording to us, lay people or patients, to say, here is your phobia, or this is the phobia of the other. This is why they are fixated on this. They're aggressively, perversely, maybe, I mean, whatever. And there is the promise of not being suppressed by the phobia if you assimilate it, negotiate it, expose yourself to it, awaken yourself to um, the hidden meanings behind it, uh, all of which allow you to marshal the inner power of the will. But the problem is that that is the very reason why the neurotic is in the position they are in, is because they believe so strongly in the power in their own in at least one part of their will, which is embroiled in this battle. Um, and and if only they achieve the right leverage point, can they exit from their condition. But the thing that, I mean, the introduction of anxiety, I mean, it means, as many of you have said, it means that what is initially felt that is then converted into fear cannot be made commensurable or assimilated into the phobic notion. And even worse, I mean, even worse than phobia, I think, is this is what has become even probably more ubiquitous, which is stress. That idea, the notion of stress, which is totally, I mean, it always has an object in this, but also doesn't. it abolishes all objecthood because it is an object that is already internalized, which is basically, my brain. Uh,
Mhm.
the condition of stress is already inside me, which makes it, I mean, maybe this is just me, as they say. But that if I were when I am told that, that makes me much that does not it's not a form of consolation unless I was somebody who believed in uh in the grind, I guess, where stress can be offloaded by finding higher forms of of uh of, I guess, stress enjoyment. I mean, this is why the this is why the notion of sublimation is deeply problematic, because sublimation can look like getting home from a stressful 8 hour, 9 hour shift and then going and playing a video game that makes me feel like I hate everyone and myself that I am am interacting with, or that feels like another form of work. But it's a form of work which I am kind of uh, relating to in a kind of pastiche or parody, which is an interesting. I mean, that is what the notion of stress in unintentionally does make present in what would otherwise be a straightforward notion of psychological sublimation, where my play looks like my work, and they're both stressful, but in one case the stress has somehow become a higher form of pleasure. At least what is, I mean, yeah, I guess what is at least made clear is that the notion of play is it is much different. It's much different than what we maybe thought about what it could be, and especially the relation to aesthetic categories like pastiche, like irony, uh, and all forms of alienation. I mean, if and they cannot be understood as purely moral categories. Um, but anyways, now I'm this line of thought is terminating, so I'll turn to Ixion's comment, um, that the repression of aggressiveness the ego is innocent of, that comes out elsewhere, that the superego is punishing and making the ego feel guilty and responsible, spoke to one aspect of stress. Yes, right. And this is, yeah, something that Zizek has noticed, to respond to Jorge's earlier remark, that the pressure to enjoy. There is a pressure to enjoy, uh, which obviously makes our concept of stress come to light. You're like, what its place is when we deploy it. Where is its place? And also uh, the vacuity of that concept, because it is, well, one can begin to say, but this is where the Zizek stuff is maybe a little bit misleading. One can begin to say that one enjoys the stress. Uh, One enjoys, I mean, again, to just parrot, um, uh, the the innocence, the innocence an innocence of an aggression that I am made responsible for when I am working and hate everything that's happening to me. I can be, I can as I can get on. Well, people don't play Call of Duty anymore, do they? I can get on Fortnite, I guess, and as Deleuze says, I can run with the wolves. I mean, that is basically the situation in which we are in, where the the people who can survive the unthinkable conditions of pressure, of pressurization in you know, the world, in the regime of the capital, are the ones who can perform this conversion of the lower into the higher stress, to be able to enter into this nomadic enjoyment of the field of stress, and simply um uh yeah, I mean, no, I personally, I mean, I had a little brother who was and still but less, maybe less toxically, as they say, but he was big into CS:GO. Counter-Strike, for those of you who don't know, is a uh, is a video game, an old video game that shooting is a first-person shooter, and uh, involves, like many online shooters, involves shit talking other strangers on the internet. It's not the only vehicle for that particular behavior, but it's a kind of innocent aggression in the style of Rameau's nephew, of a kind of abject, in kind of infantile abjection. Infantile, again, not in a necessarily moral, with a moral dimension, although that can be added to it. Um, uh, but if you were to, I mean, one can imagine, if one was to refuse that and say, be very concerned with how you use your time, uh, uh, the situation could become unbearable because of the pressure of whatever it is we mean by productivity. I mean, productivity and stress are kind of coeval terms in the psychological deployment of them, at least. Anyways, sorry for going on too long. Um, maybe
So
something
would we,
yeah, please.
so would we say that phobia is like a separate structure than like obsessional or hysterical, or is it like obsessional brought to kind of a limit, or like brought to a more defined point? Like, is it more on a spectrum, or is it a different structure? And also, like the other thing I'm thinking of in relation to that is Freud himself says he says children often have phobias that they outgrow, but the neurotics are the ones who don't outgrow them. So there's something childlike about the neurotics,
Yeah,
um, which is also interesting because like Deleuze and Guattari invert this and say that to be childlike is to escape neurosis, or children are natural Spinozas, they say, um, taking that in a kind of like um, you know in relation to where Lacan says Plato's God is psychotic, so it's like the whole that hasn't been cut into yet. But yeah, it's interesting because if phobia is a common thing that children grow out of, then arguably it's a form of development of the common neuroses that, but like an earlier stage of it. So yeah, I was just
yeah, no,
your thoughts on that.
no, yeah. I mean, that is what I was trying to, on the this childlike thing. I mean, that is what I was trying to get at with this collective ludic, no this nomadic game, these Deleuzian wolves on Overwatch or Call of Duty, or I mean, whatever is the best case, where you can, yeah, aggression. It's not that, I mean, it isn't really repression, um or it isn't really uh, a cathexis of a different kind of object. It is the same experience of stress, but now just, I mean, you don't have to worry about legitimation, which is, I mean, I think one of the things that Deleuze Guattari saw in the neurotic adult that isn't the case in the child, and rightly saw the neurotic adult, especially those who were responsible for distributing psychoanalytic techniques over children, or psychological techniques, as being you know, tyrants, is that they force children to account for their own desires. And if you work in education like me, I mean, it's very easy to become a delusion if you aren't completely evil. I'm not saying that I'm not evil at all, but because you see adults who force children to legitimate their own the agency of their desire in a way that is seems completely stultifying. As in, just an example, giving children at as young as 8, 7, 8, 9 uh, surveys at the end of classes, which would allow you to extract from them knowledge that would confirm for you the success of the session, um, and also put them into a ritual of reflecting. That's what the term would be within the institution. But you come home from work, and then you go on to this collective nomadic game, whatever game that you choose. I mean, normally games with aggression, or where aggression is folded into it as a part of the play, is privileged, because it stands at the far end of productivity as the site of stress. Um, and so one can be a child without having to undergo this neuroticizing ritual that children are um, are so are subjected to. I mean, again, so many children are treated as if they would be failures if they or all education would be a failure if they dropped out of school, or something like that. So it makes sense that there would be this resort, or there would be this uh, rechanneling of aggression into a kind of innocent, warlike abjection. There's another comment you mentioned, but it sounds like you were going to say something else. So please.
Oh, I didn't realize I was still unmuted. I guess not really. I guess what I was bringing in was the Plato and Spinoza thing, but I think that takes us too far afield now. We can definitely get into that later on in the
Well, the
seminar itself.
the
So,
the the Spinozist for certain is the Spinozism for certain is related, because I mean that is to be one with the monadic substance in, you know again, running with the wolves. This uh kind of composite experience that is mediated through this play of aggression that isn't really, is completely beyond the balance of, again, legalistic legitimation, justification. Uh, I mean, that has to be a relief, a deep relief for. I mean, a lot of it is already children who are engaging in that behavior, but even adults who do it can relive that kind of childlike freedom from conditions of neuroticization and, well, auto neuroticization. But I mean, I guess the use of psychoanalysis is, or the value of it, is to inquire into the essential dimension of uh, the object as a portal to the other, as a relation to the other, which, I mean, Lacan is always very careful about not using the concept of regression, or when he does use it, to not refer to it simply as a moment of like backwards motion. Um, I mean, yeah, the kind of Spinozistic enjoyment beyond the limit of neurosis uh, is should be considered, not a regression. It's a relief. It's a relief. It's a relief from this toxic. I mean, it's much less toxic. I mean, one can clearly see that it's much less toxic even to be on the internet as a child and call other children the N-word than to be at least in some cases, to be subject to what adults force children to undergo in the form of what are essentially publicized private confessions as to the legitimacy of their own enjoyment, which they don't understand and shouldn't because they're children. I mean, that is why it's much easier for a child to move through phobias because the object is not as stable as the adult would like to believe. And what little Hans's dad is doing to him is, I mean, Deleuze is right. It's making it worse. It's making it much worse for the dad to be like, oh, this is what it means, and the meaning is fundamental, and the child knows what it's doing. The child's power is in its ignorance, and in fact, when the children are weaponized ignorance, that's like children. Uh, Again, if you work with young children, you'll see them. They don't have to be that smart to say when you'll come across it many children who when you're like, please don't put glue in Tommy's nose. The child will say, but I'm a kid, I don't know any better. That's what I mean. And it's not a form. Again, it's not a, well, if you're shelling, you might say it's demonic, it's the appearance of the demonic. You wouldn't be wrong. It is not the model of a subjective self-knowledge at the level of Socratic uh, agency. I see. All right. So all of what Deleuze and Guattari are getting at is perfectly good in many ways, but it's not because it is, to me, it's an extension of the primacy of practical reason, and um, the I guess the development of the agency of the human being from childhood to so-called adulthood is
Anybody?
hmm?
Sorry. I'm talking to my dog. He
I don't know.
woke up and wants to walk.
Um, yeah, it is a
Mhm.
journey with the object as a relation to the other, and it's that portion of psychoanalysis that Deleuze and Guattari believe is too dangerous to be admitted, because it does. I mean, it does, like that axiom is what makes these sorts of, the neuroticizing rituals of bourgeois society that we know so well to be so effective. Um, but uh, I guess to me, any we can see abject heroism as the proof, Call of Duty abject heroism as the proof for what running with the wolves. That running with the wolves is not the utopian solution that is proposed as, and rather than being any kind of practical solution at all, is merely. But I think this is the value. It's almost a purely descriptive um, frame for this kind of natural stoical symptom formations that occur in I guess what we would call the digital age, where collectivization of the self is a kind of catharsis from the conditions of so-called stress, and the concept of stress that is itself inducing of stress. But yeah, I don't know. Perhaps that doesn't help anything, but that is my thought. Well, Jorge said that he may need to head out in a little bit, but I did want to leave some room uh for any additional noticings or comments from the reading that would be good to dwell on in this last. Yeah, yeah. I'm saying yeah to Ixion's comment.
I mean, the ultimate like thing you could turn around on that though is to say that the real life phenomenon of fascism or whatever is in fact just that, but allowed to take over society. So like it's a joke, but also the substance of the real phenomenon. I'm
Yes.
not sure if that's the best explanation though.
What do you mean?
I mean that it's simultaneously true that that stuff is a safety valve, but also maybe fascism itself is just the safety valve being allowed to take over.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for a while, it's been the case that the model of political psychosis is just occurs in this experience of being squeezed out of bureaucratic rationality. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything obviously particularly profound or novel. But even in China, the paragon of modern reason, even China went through all of this in some ways in first when the guy who thought that his brother was Jesus Christ, he uh, he came to that realization because he failed the imperial bureaucrat test, the state test, and then also was spoken to by evangelical missionaries from New England. It's almost too perfect. I mean, it's been a road we've been going down for a while, and I think yeah, your formula of a safety valve that becomes unbounded by the the energy that it's supposed to relieve is perfectly correct. But in addition to that, um, I think you know fascism is also, maybe this is too Marxist or something, but fascism is also just can be described structurally as the as a kind of class alliance between various strata, social political strata, and not merely by this kind of affective dynamic of anxiety and anxiety release, this kind of terminal dynamic that is characteristic of modern society and capitalism. I mean, that is the kind of seat, in the same sense as when Freud says that the ego is the seat of anxiety, and that seems like an obvious claim, but actually, it is very important to say that the ego and the id are not kind of qualitatively distinct, as Freud says, and that many psychoanalysts and lay people um, make this mistake of saying they're two separate parties. I mean, that is basically the liberal delusion that they are two separate parties, and you'll two separate camps rather, as Freud says. But but I think at the level of the structure of the social structure, you can have, um, I mean, you don't even need the people, the abject heroes who are running with the wolves to be political participants in order to have fascism at the in the sense of a kind of class alliance between military caste, petty bourgeoisie, big industry. I mean, that dynamic is can at least be considered on its own terms, separate from this kind of more vital vital affective dynamic at the level of, I mean, something like, I guess, individual subject formation, the formation of the modern subject. So
I
maybe, so
liked
that's to
when
say, maybe that one we can't really, I mean, we just have to accept that. But the at the level of the political structure, hopefully we don't have to accept that.
I did like when Freud compares the ego over the id to a, unpopular minority that's able to cancel out popular,
Hmm.
propositions. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, with control over the presses or something like that, he says.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Well, now, I mean, again, for a while, we've been living with this intense libidinal cathexis in the notion of the media, and now with all this, well, with media and gambling, and now we have them both in one with these bids, these auction bids, which I don't know what the latest episode is in. I'm talking about the Paramount, um, Warner Brothers thing.
But there's a market on that. Who's gonna or their gambling interest in the purchasing? I'm not
Well,
following.
I just mean that, you had the Warner Brothers accept the Netflix deal, and then and conceivably that involved multiple parties, including Paramount, and then you had the Paramount make this wager, this
Oh,
big wager, uh, that then was very offensive, I guess, but was basically seems like it was a bid to consolidate the media apparatus under this. I mean, whatever, the Barry Weiss, Kushner, what is it, David, Larry Ellison, like that, this
oh yes, yes.
constellation. And then I guess, and it was funded by like the Saudis or something, and then the Saudis withdrew. Again, unclear exactly why. I mean, maybe they thought they were not helping. But then, the kingpin again. I mean, this age of idiot geniuses came through, and now David, or yeah, the father is offering 40 billion of his own money to prop up the deal. That was the last I heard of this thing. But yeah, all about the Warner Brothers media apparatus, and who knows? I mean, it seems like it could be politically effectual, as in, if you command those, then there will be, there's some value, political value to be had in that, or it's a complete fever dream. Like, just I'm very unclear which it is.
Hmm.
But at least, I mean, I guess it is a kind of repetition of the Elon Musk Twitter thing, right? Because it was also this big. Well, now Ixion is making a theoretical point, so we can kind of descend into that as we close up. So two things, one question: repetition compulsion being felt with a demonic character. Uh, I feel like this is up Jorge's alley. The entire concept of magical thinking in undoing stuck out to me because recognized myself in both of them, not alone. Especially the idea of undoing through a repetition, not trying to correct but erase the past, in relation to obsessional disorder. Also, a question, clarification on what hysteria is in the context of the hysteria phobia having a childish root. So we can open that question up to anyone who'd like to ask, and then we can close down in 5-10 minutes or so.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that Freud says that the magical act is intended to cancel out, but then it creates two acts instead of one. So there's a kind of um, yeah, there's a little cycle to it, and it's um,
Mhm.
in each stage presumably sets the stage for the next phenomenon to follow. I'm realizing I don't have as much to say on that actually as I thought I did, but um, as far as the hysteria thing, it kind of seems like, yeah, what exactly is the, did Freud say that that phobia having a childish root is specifically associated with hysteria, or like what is that referring to?
I mean, maybe the relevance, but Iksan will correct me if it's misguided. But when Freud talks about the similarity between anxiety and the hysterical conversion, I mean, maybe the similarity is that so-called conversion hysteria is when some psychic, or in the Freudian horizon, is when some psychical reality is converted into a symptom, some kind of psychosomatic symptom.
Hmm.
Um, and and so similarly, anxiety converted into a phobic fixation on an object. So something like that. And obviously, and with children, that conversion is much more fluid, or possibly more fluid than in adults, where once you have the conversion in an adult, you have kind of the capacity to marshal um, independent interest in the object, in the phobic object, than with children who always have sort of one foot out of the fixation, unless they're being held there by their parents. And again, that's one of the reasons why Deleuze is, he has the comments that he has on Little Hans and some of the others. And yes, on this notion of undoing through repetition, this is a good point to bring up what I mentioned when we were talking about this lexical discussion of the uncanny as a model of coherence, because it is in it's a repetition in the sense that uh, the same um, referent is being repeated, and yet there's this collision or difference, divergence and convergence of significance that occurs, and it is bound. It can be represented as a as a as a continuum. That's what I mean by coherence. And in I mean, one will notice about obsessives, as you, Sean, pointed out when we were talking about the phobia. And again, I mean, this is why one psychoanalysis has to diagnose psychology with a disorder, with a kind of disorder. And so similarly, as the phobic is pathologically deployed in order to taxonomize uh, the the objects of disturbance. Um, so does the obsessive normally recognized by their attunement to semantic distinctions, uh, which are not. I mean, the obsessive is not false for that reason, for paying attention to trying to adhere more rigidly than is advisable to the meanings of specific words. But they are only by able to to refer to their own, I mean, I guess in the Freudian universe would be called psychic associations, by an indirect route to, what words are prohibited, what lines of cathexis are blocked off by virtue of a repression that come out in this kind of, I mean, yeah, what is essentially a linguistic practice. Both the obsessive and the hysteric, both of which are by Freudian and also Lacanian psychoanalysis put under the category of neurosis. So yeah, I don't know if I hope that is helpful. The repetition and the demonism, that's good. We may come back to that next week, because I'm going to put up. You guys don't need to read it. I will. I can summarize, or I will report on it. But there's a portion at the end of Kierkegaard's book on the concept of anxiety where he has a kind of short discussion on the demonic. That would be nice to put in relation with this uncanny stuff. What I have up there is just his kind of outline of the concept of anxiety, which is referenced by Lacan's in the seminar, and then the Heidegger stuff as well, which is also referenced. But Lacan does not directly reference the demonic, Kierkegaard's discussion of the demonic, but it could be enriching. So I'll put it up there, and we can check it out. And in any case, I'll report on it.
My final comment is it would be interesting. I think Kierkegaard said anxiety is sin, right? So it'd be interesting to contrast that with Lacan's desire is the law and have kind of like a um, a four-part opposition to that. But I also want to get deep into at some point into the chart, the weird chart that Lacan starts the seminar with. That's
Yes.
The plus inhibitions out on an axis based on movement and difficulty. But
yeah, all that's all a part of this theory of action and this overcoming of the thing I mentioned earlier, the Augustinian volitional subject, where emotion, I mean, you have a whole schematism of something like paralysis, forms of suspension of action, forms of motion, that can't, that are related in some way to this notion of the impediment of sin, but it is neither univocal or bifurcated in the way that it has been depicted in the Western philosophical theological tradition. And yeah, the two sides, desire and law, are relevant. Okay, well, at the risk of pushing you to beyond the limit, we can stop here, unless there are any additional comments. Thank you, everyone. I mean, this is the first. I think well, I'll get better at this, but I appreciate you all very much for coming, and yeah, if you want me to strip any of your comments or your voice from the meeting, I will. I started, Jorge, after I had I had referred to you recording, so there's not a worry with that.
oh yeah, and I appreciate that.
But yeah, so I may put it up to so it can be revisited. But thank you, and good to meet everyone also, and to interact with you.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Thanks for putting this on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
See you next week.
See you next week.